In the sun-drenched, neon-soaked landscape of the 1980s, the American highway had a king, and that king had a very specific name: Harley-Davidson. If you wanted a big, bad, unapologetically American cruiser, you bought a Harley. It was a law of nature, an undisputed fact of life. They were the masters of the road, selling a potent cocktail of rebellion, freedom, and tradition, all forged in gleaming chrome and percussive thunder. Their brand wasn't just a logo, it was an identity, a cultural monolith that seemed as immovable as Mount Rushmore. But far across the Pacific, in a lab filled with quiet, focused engineers, someone at Honda either didn't get the memo or, more likely, read it, crumpled it up, and threw it in the trash. The company that had charmed its way into the heart of the nation with the friendly slogan, "You meet the nicest people on a Honda," was secretly brewing a storm. They were meticulously crafting a V4-powered monster, a machine so outrageously, brutally fast that its arrival would send a genuine shockwave of fear rippling all the way to Harley's headquarters in Milwaukee. This is a tale of how the Honda V65 Magna, a product of pure science and logic, kicked down the door of a chrome-plated empire and, for a few glorious, terrifying years, completely rewrote the very definition of power. To truly grasp the magnitude of the earthquake the V65 Magna caused, you first have to understand the mountain it leveled. In the early 1980s, Harley-Davidson wasn't just a motorcycle brand, it was a rolling, rumbling piece of Americana. The formula they had perfected over decades was deceptively simple, but incredibly potent. A torquey, air-cooled V-twin engine thumping out that soulful, asymmetrical rumble. It wasn't just the sound of an internal combustion engine, it was marketed and accepted as the sound of freedom itself. Harley-Davidson didn't sell spec sheets. They sold an identity, a feeling, a membership to a tribe. Their motorcycles were heavy, mechanically straightforward, and when compared to the high-tech Japanese superbikes that were beginning to dominate the sport riding scene, they were not particularly fast. But that was never the point. Owning a Harley was a deliberate statement. It was a commitment to chrome, to thick leather, to a rumbling, visceral experience that was a middle finger to the quiet conformity of the establishment. For the American cruiser buyer, the choice was not just obvious, it was practically preordained. If you wanted a serious, heavyweight motorcycle that felt substantial and permanent, you bought a Harley. Everything else, especially the smaller Japanese cruisers of the time, was often dismissed as a toy, a pale imitation. Harley had weathered economic storms and fierce competition before, but the loyalty of their customer base was absolute and unbreakable. Sure, there were whispers in the corners. The technology was undeniably dated, the customer base was aging, and the brand's reliability, or lack thereof, was often the butt of 1,000 jokes about oil leaks and roadside repairs. But their throne, built from decades of American steel and cultural dominance, seemed entirely secure. They were the undisputed king, ruling their domain, completely oblivious to the fact that a company known for polite, efficient, and sensible little bikes was about to build a monster designed specifically to hunt in their backyard. While Harley-Davidson was busy polishing its chrome-plated legacy, Honda was in the lab, operating under a completely different, almost alien philosophy: relentless, forward-thinking engineering. This wasn't a company concerned with heritage, it was a company obsessed with progress. They had already turned the entire motorcycle world on its head once before with the revolutionary CB750 back in 1969, a bike so technologically advanced for its time that it single-handedly invented the term superbike and sent the British motorcycle industry into a death spiral. Now, with their sights set on a new decade, they had a new target: the lucrative, loyal, and seemingly impenetrable American cruiser market. Honda's engineers, driven by logic and a quest for performance, looked at the classic American V-twin and saw not just tradition, but limitations. To them, the equation was simple. More power from that old design meant making the engine bigger, which meant more weight, more vibration, and diminishing returns. They didn't want to just build a better V-twin, they knew they could build a better engine, period. Their answer was an ambitious and complex engine development project: a liquid-cooled V4. The concept itself was pure engineering brilliance. A V4 engine could, in theory, offer the best of all possible worlds. It promised the high revving horsepower and smoothness of an inline-4 engine, like the one in their own CB750, but with the narrower, more compact profile of a V-twin. It was a monumentally complex undertaking, a liquid-cooled dual overhead cam 16-valve engineering marvel. It was, in every conceivable way, the polar opposite of Harley's simple, air-cooled pushrod V-twin. Where Harley's engine was about soul and tradition, Honda's was all about advancement in performance. This groundbreaking V4 engine became the heart of a whole new family of motorcycles, including the Interceptor sport bike and, for the cruiser world, the Magna. The first models to appear were the V65 Magnas with a 750 cubic centimeter engine. They were already a significant shot across Harley's bow, impossibly smooth, surprisingly quick, and famously reliable. But that was just the opening act, the appetizer before the main course. Honda was saving its masterstroke, its knockout punch, for a bike with an even bigger engine and a deliberately intimidating new name, the V65. The 65 was a direct reference to cubic inches, a blatant and calculated jab at the American measurement system that Harley-Davidson and its customers lived by. The message couldn't have been any clearer. We're coming for you on your turf, and we're speaking your language. Quick throttle break. If you're loving this deep dive into the V65's impact, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. It tells YouTube you want more motorcycle history like this, and it seriously helps the channel. Now, back to the battle on the blacktop. In 1983, the cage was opened and the beast was finally unleashed. The Honda V65 Magna hit the streets, and the entire motorcycle world was left collectively stunned and speechless. This was no polite, well-mannered cruiser designed for gentle Sunday rides. This was a dragster disguised in a cruiser's clothing, a street brawler with a shockingly violent personality. The battle for the soul of the American highway had officially begun, and it was going to be brutal. Power and performance. This is where the story shifts from a simple rivalry into an outright massacre. The performance numbers from 1983 don't just talk, they scream and they mock the competition. The V65 Magna's V4 engine produced a claimed 116 horsepower. To put that into stark perspective, a brand new 1983 Harley-Davidson Superglide with its larger 80 cubic inch shovel head, the heart of the Harley lineup, made somewhere around 65 horsepower. The Honda was producing substantially more power from a significantly smaller engine. It was an engineering feat that bordered on black magic. But it wasn't just the peak horsepower figure, it was the way the Magna delivered its power that was so shocking. The bike redlined at a stratospheric, unheard of 10,000 RPM, a territory usually reserved for screaming Grand Prix race bikes. Most big twin cruiser engines, by contrast, ran out of breath and vibrated themselves to pieces around 5,000 RPM. Period road tests clocked the V65 Magna's quarter-mile time in the high 10-second range. Pro rider Jay Gleason hit 10.75 seconds at 126 miles per hour. This meant that for a brief, glorious moment in time, the V65 Magna held the title of the fastest accelerating production motorcycle on the entire planet. Not the fastest cruiser, the fastest motorcycle, period. It wasn't just faster than other bikes, it was faster than almost anything on four wheels. A 1983 Chevrolet Corvette, America's premier sports car, needed over 14 seconds to lumber through the quarter mile. This was a cruiser motorcycle, a bike with pullback handlebars and a relaxed riding position that could undoubtedly take on any car down the quarter mile. While Harley-Davidson was masterfully selling the image of rebellion, Honda had just delivered a weapon of speed. For a generation of riders hooked on the adrenaline of pure, unadulterated speed, the V65 wasn't just another option, it was the only option. The jaw-dropping power gap was the headline, but the technological chasm that separated the two machines was even wider and more profound. Harley's 80 cubic inch shovelhead engine was pure, unadulterated tradition. It was air-cooled, relying entirely on the passing wind to keep its temperature in a safe operating range. It used old-school push rods to operate its two simple valves per cylinder, a mechanically simple and proven method that was also woefully inefficient at high RPMs. It was a beautiful, charismatic piece of industrial history, a direct mechanical descendant of engines that had been designed decades prior. In stark contrast, the Honda V65's engine felt like it had been beamed down from another planet. It was liquid-cooled, employing a radiator and a complex system of internal water jackets to maintain a perfectly stable operating temperature. This stability allowed for much tighter engineering tolerances, which in turn unlocked more power and greater reliability. It had dual overhead camshafts and 4 valves per cylinder, technology borrowed directly from Honda's World Championship winning racing programs, letting the engine breathe with incredible efficiency to achieve its high RPM limit and insane power output. And the technological dominance didn't stop at the engine. The V65 Magna channeled its power through a slick, 6-speed transmission and a clean, quiet, and virtually maintenance-free shaft drive. This was a world away from the messy, high-maintenance chains on Harleys that required constant cleaning, lubrication, and adjustment. The difference for the rider was a night and day experience. The Harley felt raw, visceral, and mechanical. You felt every single power pulse, every vibration, every gear change. The Honda, on the other hand, was shockingly smooth, unleashing a turbine-like wave of relentless power that was both intoxicating and, as many soon found out, more than a little terrifying. For years, the standard defense from Harley loyalists was that Japanese bikes, while technically proficient and fast, lacked soul. They were appliances, not companions. But a more tangible issue for many Harley owners was the constant demand for attention, the infamous reliability. For decades, Hondas had cultivated an ironclad reputation for being bulletproof. They started every single time you hit the button, they didn't leak oil on your garage floor, and they didn't require constant mechanical tinkering just to keep them running. The V65 Magna, on paper, seemed to be the ultimate unbeatable combination. The performance of a guided missile fused with the turnkey reliability of a Swiss watch. It was poised to be the perfect motorcycle. But reality had a greasy, devastating secret in store for early V65 owners: the camshafts. In the frantic race to win the horsepower war and claim the title of king, a critical design flaw had emerged in the early V4 engines. The top end of the engine, specifically the 4 intricate camshafts, was not receiving an adequate supply of oil, particularly at low RPM during warm-up. The result was premature, rapid wear. Owners would begin to hear a dreaded ticking sound from the engine, a sound that grew progressively louder as the hardened surfaces of the cam lobes were literally eaten away, ground down into soft, rounded nubs. The stories of V65 Magnas with soft cams spread like wildfire through the motorcycle community. Honda was eventually forced to address the issue, and later models featured redesigned oiling systems, but the damage to the bike's reputation for invincibility was done. It was the crack in the armor, the chink in the perfect weapon. It gave Harley loyalists the perfect damning comeback. See? That's what happens when you get too complicated. Our simple V-twins might be slower, but they're built to last. The V65 Magna's V4 engine was an undisputed masterpiece of engineering, a technological marvel of its time. The rest of the motorcycle, however, wasn't. It was as if Honda's brilliant engine department had built a fully functional rocket engine and then, as an afterthought, handed it over to the bicycle division to find something to bolt it to. The raw, unholy violence of the V4 completely and utterly overwhelmed the chassis it was forced to live in. Honda's rocket scientists built a nuclear warhead, then bolted it into a bicycle frame. The V65 cradle was only 0.2 inches longer than the V45's, and when 69 foot-pounds of torque slammed the shaft in first gear, the rear end rose like a powerboat, a phenomenon magazines called shaft jack. Testers swore the handlebars felt like a tiller once the front wheel floated at 80 miles per hour. It wasn't unrideable, just unforgiving. Motorcycle reviewers of the day would fill pages with praise for the magnificent engine, then immediately follow up with stern, sober warnings about the bike's questionable handling. The suspension was soft and squishy, calibrated for comfortable, gentle cruising, not for managing 116 horsepower. When a rider dared to hammer the throttle, the shaft drive would cause the entire rear end of the motorcycle to jack up, unsettling the chassis and making the handling even more precarious. And the brakes? While they were considered advanced for a cruiser at the time, featuring dual front discs, they were simply no match for a 600-pound behemoth that could accelerate to warp speed in just a few seconds. In a strange and paradoxical way, this untamed, sketchy, and frankly dangerous character became a crucial part of the V65's enduring legend. You didn't just ride a V65 Magna, you survived it. It was a machine that demanded respect, a high level of skill, and a healthy dose of raw courage from its pilot. It was a wild, exhilarating, and untamable machine from a bygone era before traction control, ABS, and electronic rider aids. It wasn't just a muscle bike, it was a bucking bronco, and for a certain type of thrill-seeking rider, that's exactly why it's so fondly remembered. The V65 Magna was produced for a few short years from 1983 to 1986 and continued in Canada and Europe as the VF1100C Magna through to 1988. It may have been brief, but its violent reign sent powerful tremors through the motorcycle industry that are still being felt today. Its legacy far outlasted its production run. First, the V65 Magna, along with Yamaha's equally insane VMAX, which arrived on the scene in 1985, created an entirely new category of motorcycle. The power cruiser, or as it became known, the muscle bike. Before the Magna, cruisers were primarily about style, sound, and a relaxed attitude. The V65 proved that you could have both laid-back, feet-forward ergonomics and the kind of brutal performance that could challenge dedicated sport bikes. It was a new species of motorcycle, a blueprint that would directly influence the design of powerful cruisers for decades to come, including, in a twist of beautiful irony, Harley-Davidson's own liquid-cooled, high-performance V-Rod, which debuted nearly 2 decades later. Second, the V65 also forced Harley-Davidson to wake up from its complacent slumber. The Japanese weren't just building cheap copies and polite runabouts anymore. They were innovating at a blistering pace and were now beating Harley at its own game of raw, intimidating power. This intense pressure was a huge contributing factor in pushing Harley to modernize and improve. It lit a fire under the company, leading directly to the development of the much improved, more reliable, and more powerful Evolution engine that debuted in 1984, an engine that arguably saved the company. In a strange way, the very bike that scared Harley-Davidson to death might have been the shock to the system it desperately needed to survive and eventually thrive. And finally, the V65 Magna cemented its status as an undisputed cult classic. Its very short production run, its legendary world-beating speed, and its infamous, well-documented flaws all combined to create a powerful mystique. It was tangible proof that Honda, the company of sensible, reliable, and sometimes boring machines, had a wild, untamed side. It proved they could build something crazy, irrational, and unbelievably fun. Today, clean, well-maintained examples are sought-after collector's items, an affordable ticket to owning a piece of motorcycling history. A bike that once held the undisputed title of the baddest machine on the planet. So, was the Honda V65 Magna a success? If you're looking purely at sales numbers or its short lifespan, the answer is probably not. Its reign was brief, and the camshaft scandal left a permanent scar on its otherwise brilliant reputation. It certainly didn't destroy Harley-Davidson, but if you measure success in terms of sheer impact, audacity, and influence, then it was a monumental, unqualified success. The V65 Magna was a declaration. It was Honda flexing its incredible engineering muscle, proving to the world that a cruiser could be the fastest and most powerful thing on the road. It was a paradigm shift, a moment that fundamentally changed what people thought a cruiser could be. The V65 Magna is a legend not because it was perfect, but precisely because it was so gloriously imperfect. It was a wild, untamed heart of pure power wrapped in a chassis that could barely contain its fury. It represents the absolute peak of the 1980s horsepower wars, a period of glorious, unapologetic excess before computers and safety regulations toned everything down. So if this deep dive into Honda's wild side got your throttle hand twitching, then you're exactly the kind of rider we want in this community. Hit that subscribe button and join us for more stories of the machines that shook the world. Drop a comment with your favorite 80s muscle bike or the one that tried to kill you, and smash that like button if you want more horsepower history. Until next time, ride safe, ride hard, and I'll see you on the next ride.